I am so honored and delighted to have on the podcast today Sarah Marie Bilgner, and she is another Sarah Marie. She's also really interested in postpartum and also has a podcast called Entering Motherhood that is fantastic and jam-packed with juicy episodes that can be really supportive for anyone in their parenting journey. So Sarah Marie, thank you so much for being here and for the resources you're creating.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here and really just get chatting.
Yes, I know, me too. So I'm curious, let's just dive in. What brought you into the postpartum world? Because I feel like it's a special niche, and it's always interesting to know like what draws people to this really special time of supporting families.
Yeah. So my journey started almost, 4 years ago. My daughter was born through an unplanned cesarean, and I had literally thought I was doing all of the things. I was, taking a birth class. I had a doula. I was, learning what I thought I needed to learn and prepping how I thought I needed to prep. And sure enough, after a very long labor, we needed to have a cesarean. So, and I guess knowing what I know now, that need for a cesarean might have been a little questionable, but it was something that we chose in that time. And it's something that I've had to do a lot of processing and recovering from along my own personal journey. And then in that process is when, I started my podcast and I really started talking to people and finding all these resources to help me along my motherhood journey, because I was like, there's no way it should be this hard. And there is just so much knowledge that we're not exposed to on a day-to-day basis. So I really started, meeting with all these people. Like I met people in person for coffee that I had never known before. And I was just like, this is so cool. And so like getting involved with the birth community in the area and really just finding other people online and in other places exposed me to all of this. And I just became a complete like birth nerd, like everything in there. And I was like, I need to follow this because something's there and it lights me up. And obviously there's a reason that I'm so interested in all of this material. So that really kind of like propelled me into where I am now. And I just had, well, I say just, but it's been a year now. My son, he was born by an unmedicated VBAC. So
Amazing. Wow. So you've had a wide spectrum of experiences.
yes, two very different birth experiences and two very different postpartum experiences. So I think, learning all that I have, I can confidently say like each birth is different, each baby's different, and each time we fall into this motherhood experience all over again. So it's been like crazy, but I've really loved all of it, and I enjoy learning as much as I possibly can about motherhood.
Oh, such a beautiful journey. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it is just this amazing kind of portal, and there's just so much potential there in the postpartum, in preparing for motherhood and postpartum. Like there's just it's this juicy time. I oftentimes hear about people that start podcasts either like while they're pregnant or, as they're about to give birth to their baby or right after. Like there's just this creative floodgates just seem to open, and healing through so many dimensions happens at that time too. I mean, it can be painful and not always sunshine and rainbows, but it's transformative regardless.
Yeah. And I think if you're willing to be open to that experience and you're willing to receive like what's really happening to you, I think it makes it that much cooler of an experience. Because I think, like there's friends that I talk to about this kind of stuff and they're like, okay, yeah, like it's just you're a mom, like, and they're not as, I would say, like open to what is being presented to us. And sometimes like I feel unique in that experience, but then I, find people that are willing to dive a little deeper, get more, woo woo about it, and really just try to understand and let their curiosity go with this motherhood experience and really see like what is happening here.
Yeah. Oh, so incredible. And it makes me think, just, I have some curiosity around, you mentioned briefly that there were such dramatic differences in your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum for both babes. I'm curious if there's anything you want to share there. And I feel like your journey with a VBAC is really powerful and potent too, because that's something that I think a lot of times women get scared away from even exploring that option, but it can be so empowering if it works for them,
Yeah. Yeah. I think with my cesarean, it was something that I now understand as I almost like needed to experience to have such an appreciation for like what birth can become. So it's a weird concept of like kind of, I think if I didn't have that unplanned cesarean, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I wouldn't have such a curiosity and like a drive for wanting to have an unmedicated vaginal birth. I think, I went into it just kind of like, oh, okay, like I'm going to have a baby, like walk into the hospital, do the things that you're supposed to do. And when that didn't happen, I was just kind of like propelled down a path of like, why isn't this happening? And I was very like rigid and controlled with how things were going to go. And even like in the postpartum period. And I think it is too a little bit of that like first time mom syndrome kind of thing that was going on compared to now. But even in like the very early months of that like over hyper anxiety feelings and everything, I look back at it now and I'm just like what? Like, why was I like worried about all these little things? But I think it's just something that like, we kind of go through. And I think like I kind of went through it in a hyper state so that I could see and understand those feelings a little bit more so that I can hopefully, help other moms if they're feeling those same things.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like there's so much perfectionism in our culture and like getting it right, whatever that may be in our mind. And so I definitely see sometimes women or birthing people feel like just let down, maybe by their bodies or by their doulas or their doctors or the culture if they don't have the birth that they want. And I remember in one of my postpartum trainings or in one of my birth doula trainings, we just talked about like all the different possible outcomes and what can happen and kind of like spelling that out during pregnancy. Like sometimes if we go down this path, like sometimes these other things will happen. And it's just, yeah, it's this portal of change, and you can't plan everything, like you can have the best intentions and you don't always get to decide how it all unfolds.
Yeah. And that's something that I try to prepare my clients for now. And I think it's something that, like intaking in clients and like going down the doula route, it's hard at first, again, like just like a first time mom, like if you're a first time doula and you're going into this work, you're, not exposed to this before you get that experience, and to have to see a mom like go through something that maybe isn't ideal or exactly like what she had envisioned, and like you're seeing it from like a third perspective, like like you still did an amazing job, like like maybe this didn't happen or that didn't happen, but like you got this and that. So it's like, again, like that perfect scenario, you have to prepare them for like, hey, like these are going to be like I say like preferences, but it might not happen, or there might be like an external factor that like we're not envisioning. Like, how are you going to feel if that happens, or like how is this going to go? And I think it's like one thing like saying that you're gonna like be okay, like if like this or that happens, like especially working with VBAC moms, like you hope that they get that vaginal birth, but sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes there's like different experiences. So I think it's just like being open to that like change and learning how to, I don't necessarily want to say like accept, but process those changes.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I think that's really helpful just to consider the range of possibilities of what can happen. Because even like, I've never given birth, I'm not a mother, but even in this training, like it just made me realize, spelling out the options of what can happen, it made me realize my own biases and the disappointment I would feel if I didn't have what I wanted. And I was like, whoa, this gets heavy fast if you don't get your dream scenario, especially if you've imagined something happening
Mhm.
in a certain way.
Yeah.
I think that's helpful just to, talk that out with people and open it up as like a possibility, like, and talking about it as preferences, I think is really powerful and helpful too.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it definitely helps kind of set up the mindset of it and really just open you up to different outcomes. Like you hope for, that dream scenario, but understanding that like maybe all those things aren't going to be checked. And just, also though, I think it's like there's talk sometimes like that, like, oh, well, at least like you and the baby are safe, or like at least like this and that. And I think it's like understanding like even though that's the case, there still can be some disappointment or trauma that was exposed to the mother. So I think just kind of like going through that situation gently
Mm.
and knowing that like if you do have a birth doula or postpartum doula, like they do care about you in the sense of like they want you to get what you need and to heal in the best way possible. So they're there to support you along any journey.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great reminder. It makes me think of there's just a range of experiences and expectations and different ways that people plan for motherhood. And I see sometimes people are like, oh, I see the value of a birth doula, but I definitely don't need any help in postpartum. And then sometimes people are like, oh, we know we want postpartum support, but we don't need any support for the birth. So I'm curious because you support people through birth, postpartum, and also emotional support along that spectrum. So I'm curious just your insights into what should people look for, or what can be helpful for people in preparing for this time? Because I think there's a lot of times people feel like deer in headlights, like, whoa, I didn't know this is what was going to happen. So I'm curious how you kind of help your clients prepare for this time.
Yeah, I feel like it's a full continuous process. So, even before the moment you find out you're pregnant, I think once you step into that role and say, like, I want to be a mother, or like, this is the path that, I want to proceed with, I think that's really where your journey ultimately starts. And starting there to get your curiosity in a mindset of like, what do I want that to look like? What do I want this process to be like? And understanding, like where along that path do I feel like I need guidance or feel like I need support that I can't get maybe necessarily from the people that are directly around me. And so like a lot of the times, even if you do say like, oh, I just want like a postpartum doula, like I want somebody just to like come over, like do some house stuff and things and such like that, I think like you're not fully able to grasp like what those services are if you're not like initially kind of tapping into that, at least even like that space, that realm. Because I think like if they are like taking care of your baby, for example, while you sleep, you need to have trust, you need to have a relationship built up with this person in order to be able to give them that space and welcome them into your home. So, most like postpartum doulas, I think, would kind of do like prenatal appointments, but like kind of seeing like what other services they have, or seeing like how else they can help you. Like maybe they have a workbook, or like just free resources, or, other material that you can really like start building that relationship with them, so that like when the postpartum period comes, you're like, oh, I heard, this episode about whatever, or like, like I know about this, or like I'm exposed to this, or you just know that that person is going to be able to have a conversation with you in regards to like anything that's coming up, like emotionally or just physically. And you can say like, hey, this doesn't seem right. Or, I'm having these thoughts. Like, do you have any experience with that? And you're comfortable with them. So I think like it's really like, again, that like continuous process of finding somebody that, you can utilize in multiple ways and really see what their full range of services is.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I know. And I think it's helpful also to have like referral lists. And yeah, I think having different ways of offering support to people. I love that idea of a workbook, or like I have a list of recipes for freezer meals that
Mhm.
for postpartum mamas. But yeah, I like that idea of creating more resources for people in that time. It's really helpful. I'm curious, what are some of the complications or things that people should know? Like, let's say someone had a C-section and they wanted to have a vaginal birth. Like, are there any resources there or suggestions that you have for making that transition?
Yeah, I think definitely starting with processing your cesarean birth and really kind of like going through that and seeing like maybe even if it's just writing it down and seeing like where you get caught up on saying like, oh, I wish this would have happened, or I wish this didn't happen, or, like what's really mentally kind of blocking you, or what you think you could have done differently, or you could have like stopped this or that. Like I think that was like a main thing that I needed to go through, and something that I hear like a lot of other moms that are preparing for a VBAC, like they needed to process that first cesarean birth and really like understand like that is what happened, but I can have a different outcome moving forward. And so I think that's like number one, like really just like mentally healing from it. And then also, like the physical healing. Like I never even knew what scar massage was until I was preparing for my vaginal birth. So, you can Google it, you can look up a lot of different resources, but like scar massage is important to make sure that the tissues are really worked through, and what's the word for it?
Like resilient or
Yeah, as like
flexible?
much as they can be.
Mhm.
So that's something like I went to pelvic floor therapy, I did cupping, just like basic hand massages on it, things like that. So like physically recovering from the cesarean as well. And then just kind of preparing your body in a way that maybe you didn't the first time around, or sometimes it could have been a breech situation where your provider was like, we have to do cesarean, that's what's happening. And so now like you might just kind of be like, oh, like I just don't want to have a breech birth again, like maybe spinning babies or different movements, like different things that you can kind of do to help prevent those outcomes again. And sometimes it's just situations that are like out of your control. So I think it's really just kind of looking at it differently and processing and understanding that you can have a different birth. It doesn't have to be, I think a lot of people think like, oh, like once you have a cesarean, you always have a cesarean. Like that's just what it is. And I think kind of like pushing that boundary and like getting curious on what your other options are. There's like crazy scenarios too that they say like, oh, like you'll never be able to have a vaginal birth, like your pelvis is too small, or like the way that your incision is. And I think just like continuously pushing that and getting curious about it and finding a provider who is willing to support your desires. And I think like you have to want it. I think, like to go through and have another cesarean, I think, that's a decision that's perfectly understandable as well. And there's people that do that, that's a choice that they're making. But if you want to have that vaginal birth, I think looking at what all your options are and constantly kind of like pushing for like, well, why does this have to be the case? What can I do, or what are my other options, is helpful.
That is so beautiful. I think that makes so much sense. Like looking at all of your resources and then also doing kind of a deep dive into the self and processing what happened, because oftentimes if we aren't able to process and be witnessed in our pain, it keeps returning and it doesn't move forward. And so I think to, be held, and either through writing or through talking with your partner or talking with, someone else who's able to hold space for that container of shifting that dynamic, I think that can be really helpful. And then also looking at the actual tissues, because there's that idea like the issues are in our tissues, or like the body keeps the score. Like our bodies hold these memories and hold these stories. And so through massage or through movement and, just kind of like releasing those stories and like just dismantling that like stagnant energy of a story that we've been telling ourselves and figuring out a new way to tell that story, I think could be so empowering. That's really beautiful.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Like figuring out a new way to tell that story and really kind of changing that narrative and seeing like, this maybe was out of my control. There is nothing that like I did specifically. My body can do this. My baby wasn't too big. My pelvis wasn't too small. Like it's a different experience. It's a new baby. It's a new time. I think just understanding that and going through it. I mean, we started like a local support group here specifically for cesareans and VBACs. And it's been really awesome just seeing like these women come together. Like maybe some of them just had a cesarean and they know that they want to have kids again one day, but they don't know what that looks like or how long they should wait or what that process is like. Or maybe, they are pregnant with their second and they are preparing for that vaginal birth after cesarean. And they're kind of like, bringing up these fears or just like, having questions about like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? Like, I think like VBAC moms are really unique in the sense of like, they want to find as much information as possible so that they can feel empowered and, ready to take on what that is going to look like. So I think really kind of like chasing that curiosity and seeing, what information is out. Finding people that believe in you is going to help encourage you along that path. Like I definitely had resistance from other people in going and preparing for my VBAC. Like they were like, well, you're going to at least be in the hospital, right? Or like, what, you're going to do that? Like, isn't that scary? Like there's a lot of risks involved. And I mean, if you compare it, like there's just as many risks to have a repeat cesarean as there is to have a VBAC. So I think it's just making the decision and feeling confident in that decision that you're going to take is really like what's going to help.
Yeah. Oh, that's so empowering. I think just feeling confident in your decision and proceeding in that way, because our minds will tell us what we're capable of. And if we tell ourselves and surround ourselves with people that say you can't do it, then you can't do it. But if you find a community that's like, you can do this, and you do mindset work and physical body work and, educating yourself, I think that is such a great step. Obviously that doesn't cure all things. There's like privilege, there's access, there's so many other layers, but I think mindset is an interesting starting point and can make a big difference in what we think we're capable of, and then just being more confident and proceeding from that place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, just talking about that idea of the difference between your postpartum for your C-section versus your VBAC. I'm curious what that felt like. Like, how were they different?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like with my cesarean, I didn't have a vaginal birth. So, I was totally clueless on what like recovery was going to be like for that. Like, I didn't know if I was going to bleed still or like what that process was going to be like. And, if you don't know, you do still have a period afterwards. You do still, bleed after a cesarean birth. And you also have this massive scar on your body, and you're kind of, you're physically kind of restrained to that incision. And it was interesting, like, to have to come home with this little baby, and I couldn't lay down all the way. It was too painful to get in and out of bed, and I was nursing her too, like different positions that you have to hold them in because you don't want them to irritate the scar or touch the scar. Really kind of like taking that and not knowing what that was going to be like. Like, I did not prepare to have a cesarean. Like, up until the day that it happened, I had no idea that that was going to be my postpartum experience. So I think also like just being in that kind of like new mom state, or just even just like that new baby state, navigating all of that, I kind of pushed myself to the back. Like, it was like all focus on the baby. And I really didn't take time to understand like what had happened to me and like what that process was like. And it probably wasn't until about 6 months postpartum that I felt like I almost like came up for air. And I was like, what happened? Like, what did I do? Like, I had major surgery. Like, I was in the OR. Like I think it really was just kind of pushed down and set aside until all of a sudden I realized, like what I had been through. So that postpartum experience was really just like a huge, massive like realization and kind of like understanding of what my body had been through, and like healing from that trauma, and really kind of processing it in that sense. And then, then with my VBAC, it was the first vaginal birth that I ever had. And like I had to get stitches. And so like, like recovering from stitches internally versus like the scar stitches and everything, navigating that, like understanding how my pelvic floor was different in that scenario, feeling like I physically could move better, but still needing to have to take the time to heal and recover was challenging, because I was like, well, I feel so much better than I did, with the C-section, because I'm not like on pain meds and I'm not like, having to deal with a scar. But there's other things that come with your body in the postpartum period with having a vaginal birth. So it was really kind of just like navigating those two. And also now with also had a toddler.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, it's not, you're not just caring for the newborn, you're also caring for a toddler as well. So, you think like, oh, like I've already done this once, like this is going to be easy. But now you're, juggling two kids and going through that process. So I think with every time you have a baby, you're entering that motherhood experience again and again.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Just kind of the different layers of it that it brings with each new pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious how you did process your birth, if there's anything you want to share there or suggestions. Like, one thing that comes to mind is kind of the idea of parts work, where you create a dialogue between like a part of your body and your wiser self. It's something that I've done with my therapist that it's really fun and brings out some things. So I'm like, oh, that could be fun to do at the womb. Like just first thought, best thought, like writing out a dialogue of like your womb and, other parts of your body or your spirit, and just seeing like
Yeah.
that dialogue of what comes. But I'm curious if there was any resources that helped you, like therapy or someone you worked with or a course you took or a book you read, if there's like anything really juicy that helped you kind of heal from your experiences.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a bunch of stuff. I think honestly, like I said, like at that 6-month postpartum like point, like I really was like, what is happening? What's going on? Like I remember like being on the bedroom floor crying, not even knowing, like I was like, who am I? Like what
Mm.
is motherhood? Like what is going on? I had, gone back to work and was really, diving into that all again. And it was just sort of what's happening. So I think I'm one to like I don't just do one thing. Like I just like massively start like 5 things at once. So it was
Yeah.
like I don't know like what one thing specifically really triggered it, but I think moving my body more and really just kind of like experiencing like the flow of how my body wanted to move and like releasing energy in that sense was super helpful. Finding something creative to do and really like stimulating my mind, I think helped a lot. Like even if it's just journaling or like you know, listening to music, like really just kind of like finding a puzzle to do or, like anything like that, that's really just like engaging your mind in a way that's different than caring for your baby or caring for yourself. And then, focusing on yourself though, too. Like I did a lot of like, I'm going to take a bath night. Like
Mm.
I need to just get out of the house and be by myself. I need to, engage in conversations with adults. Like I need to, separate myself from who I was as a mom or an employee or like anything of that sort. It's like I needed to really just disengage and be like somebody on my own. Also, just kind of like how I was feeling my body, what I was like taking in and how that was affecting me. Yeah, I think it was just, a huge spew of things that I have tried to really capture and go through that process of what it was like to really heal in that sense, and starting my podcast and really talking about my experience and talking with other people. I think when we hear other people's journeys and other people's experiences, we really are able to be like, oh, maybe that's what I was going through, or maybe that's how I was feeling, and really connecting in that sense and trying to understand, like, if you had to tell your story, what would that look like? What would that be? Yeah. And I think just, sparking all that curiosity, like getting more in tune with maybe your feminine side and creativity and really just, maybe playing with your kid in a sense of like just that playful energy. Yeah, I
Oh,
think it was a whole bunch of stuff.
yeah, beautiful. I know. I never like do just one thing either. I'm always like all the things.
Mhm.
So I totally relate to that. So beautiful. And I am so curious to hear a little bit more about your podcast because I feel like in order to do the work of a podcast, you have to really have a fire lit under you to maintain it. And you've been very consistent. I'm curious to how you've done that because for me, I've like fallen off here and there, but I love doing it too. It's just so fun to have these conversations with other people that have these rich experiences. So yeah, I'm curious like I guess how you have stayed consistent with the podcast and what that has brought to your life.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been very therapeutic. It's been something that, like I get to detach from. And yes, I talk about motherhood. Yes, it's still like, tied to who I am as a mom, but like it's my own unique time to really have deep, engaging conversations with people. It's my time to help understand, what I'm going through or resources that can like help me. So like almost it's like I crave it and I want to do it. So like it helps me stay consistent. And then I see like the benefits that other people are getting from it. So it's then like fueling it on that sense. Like, I feel like what helps keep a podcast consistent is like you're doing it, because it lights you up and like you're getting that, excitement from it yourself. And you feel so strongly about this information that you want it to get out there that it kind of propels you in this sense of, well, I'm already recording these like awesome conversations. Like, I need to get it out there so like other people can like consume it and get intrigued by it and really, have that almost, I think podcasts are so unique because it is like you can just pop in your headphones or play it in your car and you can listen to a full-blown conversation and never have to jump in or say anything. So, like maybe it's more like appealing to introverts in a way in that sense, because like they can, listen to all of this, but they don't have to engage in any sort of, conference room or like, be there and or like seem like they're eavesdropping. It's like they get to consume and really, how do I say it?
Yeah, it's almost like being a fly on the wall of like these
Yeah.
fun conversations. Like I am such a podcast junkie, and I think part of it is because I'm an introvert and I want to like hear those conversations, but I don't always want to have the conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, like I was always listening to podcasts before I started mine. And it was just something that like, I would play in the car when I was driving or like walking around the house or whatever it may be. Like I was always, putting something on because I'm such a like seeker of knowledge and like gaining more information and like how can I know more? And I think it's a different experience than maybe like, watching a video or like you're not scrolling anywhere. Like it literally like can just be something that is there while you're living your like everyday life. Like you can be walking, you can be, out with your kids and still just like pop in like one earbud. And I think it's just such a cool experience. So like I was already consuming them and I was like, oh, like wouldn't that be cool if I could be a podcaster? It's
I
like
love
one of
that.
those things, you buy like your first like pair of headphones and mic and you're like getting all giddy and then you're like, wait, like how do I actually do this? Like how do I upload it? Like I think it's just, like one of those things, like then you like actually have to figure out like how do I make this work? And I think like that was exciting for me too, to really like, learn something new. And I think putting ourselves through new experiences is a way of like healing as well. Like we're, getting our mind activated and working in a way that it's never done before. And so like it's exciting. And so yeah, I think that's why like I continue to do it. And I did take like a little break, like just this past, I guess it was fall-ish, like the end of last year, because it was just like everything coming and I wanted to like, be able to touch back for the holidays and like engage with my family a little bit more. So I intentionally, took that time to really like disconnect and recharge so that I could like come back a new year, like starting again. And I think that's what's cool about podcasts too. Like you can do that. Like you intentionally say like to your listeners, hey, like I'm going to take a break right now, but like this is where else like I'm going to be hanging out, or like consume, like I said, like consume the other 120 episodes that I have. If you just started listening now, like there's a whole bunch of them that you can go back to and listen to. So there's always that like evergreen of content that like somebody that's just finding you, like maybe this is the very first episode that they're listening to and they enjoy the conversation. So then they're going to go back and just continue to consume or look and scroll through the titles and say like, oh, that sounds interesting. And I think that's what's really cool about it.
Yeah. Oh my,
So
it's such a, yeah, there is so much there. It's such a fun platform. I similarly just love getting to have these conversations, and it is so fun to listen back and just notice, oh, that's what that person was really saying. Like I love being able to kind of relive the conversations too. It's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I edit all my episodes still. And like, I love like going back through and listening to it again, because sometimes when you're having that conversation with somebody, you even forget what you said, or you forget like what they said. And to have it just record it and there to tap into like over and over again, I think is just a really neat philosophy. And it's different than, like, and even with transcripts and stuff though too, like they can be, consumed in different ways. So there's a lot there. It's good
Yeah.
content.
Yeah, so good. And actually, as you say that, it reminds me there's like a form of therapy of just recording your conversations and then like with a therapist or whatever, and then re-listening and listening to what you say can be such medicine and really reveal to yourself maybe how you want to shift your story or how you're thinking about things, and makes you realize like, oh, I could shift this dynamic in a different way. So that's interesting, just how it can be like a form of therapy too.
Yeah. 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 I completely agree with that.
Yeah, so interesting. Well, I absolutely love chatting with you, Sarah Marie. And I have a couple bonus questions if there's time. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Okay, awesome. So I'm curious, one thing you feel really grateful for in your life right now.
Oh, one thing. I think, I don't know. I like what's coming to mind like immediately right now is like I have this picture of my kids like sitting here. Like I love consuming myself with like things that I like enjoy, but just their relationship and seeing them bond, I think has been really cool and something that I never, knew that I'd be able to see, and really just seeing like their excitement in this time in their life and just again like learning new things and having those experiences.
Oh, so beautiful. Yeah, that's so sweet. I love seeing siblings together. It's just like the best. So precious. I'm curious, something you're excited about in the year ahead.
Hmm. I feel like I'm always terrible at these like rapid fire
Oh, sorry.
questions, but
They're a little heavy.
yeah,
They're not like
I
the
think
easiest. It's not like coffee or tea, but
I
coffee or tea?
know. I think there's a lot of stuff that I'm really excited about this year. I think, we have a couple weddings coming up, like we have, different things planned. We might, try again for another baby. Like
Wow.
the year is still so young. I think that like really anything can happen. And yeah, I'm just excited to see like where things go, like where the podcast goes, where my business goes, like where my curiosity goes, like where just I can really kind of tap into a lot of different stuff and the people that I'll meet. I think that's what's been like the most fun. Like again, like being like mostly introverted, but like also like really enjoying like people's company and stuff. Like I like to say like I'm like introverted except for like around my friends. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm like a different person around people that I like thoroughly enjoy being around. And so just meeting new people that I'm going to connect with. Like if I think this past year, all of the people that I've been able to connect with and how cool of an experience that's been, I can only imagine like the amount of people that I'm going to connect with and hear from and learn from in the next year. So,
Oh,
yeah.
so beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I'm curious, something that has been a challenge that you've overcome?
Recently or just in general?
Yeah, whatever comes to mind. Could be recently or in general.
Hmm. Yeah, I think, let's see. I think there's always like excitements and then like challenges too. And I think, like my VBAC was definitely something that was a challenge that I had overcome in this past year. And also just like building a relationship with my husband again, I think has been an experience, but it's something that like is challenging to like remember to tap into that and connect with them in that sense, because you are like like working on yourself and now you're parenting and you have your children, and it's like you have to remember that like that relationship is there too. And I think like learning new ways for us to communicate together and learning new ways of like connecting has been challenging with two kids. So, like they're everywhere and they're busy. So I think like remembering that and remembering that like, you want to have that relationship with them in any sense, like if you have a partner or just like, relationships in your life and making that more of a priority, I think, in understanding, the importance of that partnership.
Yeah, so beautiful. I think it can be so challenging to navigate the relationship dynamics in postpartum and motherhood and parenting. And but it's like, okay, that's what brought you together. So
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of prioritizing that can be such good medicine. Amazing. Any last resources or anything that you want to shout out? Anything that's been helpful in your journey, a book or a podcast or something that you want to that you offer?
Yeah, I mean, definitely like head on over wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can find Entering Motherhood, and I'll share all of the links that I have as far as like, I have a whole page on my website that's full of resources, and all of those resources are past guests that have been on the podcast. So it sends you like right to their episode, where you can find them, like how you can find more information with them. And that's something that like I really compiled. And then I'm also starting to do like some free resources that are basically like couple page PDFs of simple, like hacks and tips and ways that you can like navigate the postpartum period, or even just like items that I've found useful. And it's not like specific brands or anything like that. It's really just kind of like basic things that have helped me along my postpartum experience for both, but slowly like building that up more. I really want to create more resources for specifically like recovering from cesareans and like preparing for VBACs, because I think they are very unique as opposed to just like a general, list or resource of postpartum material.
Yeah, that's such a brilliant idea. I'll definitely have links for all of that in the show notes. So thank you for creating all of that. Amazing. Well, Sarah Marie, thank you again so much for making time. It was such a delight to connect with you and just be inspired by all that you're doing and all that you're helping people with. Oh, I saw also that you offer one-on-one consults with people. Just wanted to leave a little space just to talk about that too. Actually, what does that look like? Because that seems like something that could be done virtually.
Yeah, that can 100% be something that's done virtually. Like, I mean, just like we're connecting here, it's just a way like I make workbooks for, either birth or like pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, really kind of like being there as a contact person as you're working through that material, or even just like if you kind of want to, pick my brain in a sense of like my experience and then like what I can, help you with, which is really kind of like understanding your pregnancy and birth and postpartum experience a little bit more, and using the resources that I've gained.
Amazing. Cool. Thank you so much, Sarah Marie, and have a wonderful day. And I'm excited to trade podcasts and be on your podcast in the near future too.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been amazing.
Oh, yes. So fun to connect with you. I'll be sure to suggest people work with you one-on-one as well. Awesome.